Hello, welcome to the Argo course. My name is Mohammed and I'm very happy to be here. So far, we became familiar with some different Argo tools, such as Argo-cd, argo-rollouts, and argo-workflows, and we learned how to work with them, how to configure them, and how to use them. But for now, in the current session and in the next session, I will implement a real-world scenario to combine all these tools together to create a CI/CD pipeline. In this session, I will use CD, rollouts, and workflows, and in the next session, I will expand this scenario using argo-events. Okay, but what is the scenario and what should I do here? First of all, we need an application. We need a very simple application. It doesn't matter what it is. In this scenario, I'm going to use Nginx as a very simple application to use its web page. Okay, so Nginx is the application of this scenario. First of all, I'm going to run a Docker container based on Nginx Docker image to show you something. So I type docker run -d -name Nginx and -p 8080 Nginx Alpine. Very good. So when I go to my web browser and I type localhost 8080, this is the default web page of Nginx. I'm going to use my own HTML file to replace the content of this web page. Because of that, when we go to combining Argo tools directory and app directory here, we have two different files, Docker file and index.html file. First of all, let's go to Docker file. This Docker file is based on Nginx Alpine image, and Docker will copy index.html into user share Nginx HTML. So if I run a container based on this Docker image, you will see the new content in this web page here. Okay? And this is the index.html I'm using, a very simple HTML file. And it will print a message to us. Welcome to my website, for example, version 1. Let's build the Docker image based on this Docker file. Let's go to app directory, combining Argo tools in app directory. We have two files here. I type docker build -t nginx v1 and point. Very good. And I type, first of all, let's remove the previous container. So I type docker rm-f nginx and run a new container based on new Docker image. So when I refresh this page, you will see the content of our HTML file here. Welcome to my website, version 1. Let's imagine that this is the source code of my application, for example. So if I make a change into this HTML file, for example, I change version 1 to version 2, for example, I need to replace the Docker image and run a new Docker container based on new Docker image. So building the Docker image, rebuilding the Docker image are all the tasks that I'm doing them manually, but it's not desirable. I'm going to use a tool named argo-workflows to all these tasks automatically, building the Docker image and rebuilding the Docker image. So if I make a change in the source code of my application, argo-workflows will build the Docker image based on the latest changes of my application. So the first task of Argo workflows in this scenario is building the Docker image of my application based on its latest changes. Okay? And then I need to push my Docker image. I need to push a Docker image of my application into a private registry. I have set up Nexus private registry for this scenario. So the IP address of my Nexus server is this. And this is the Nexus server as a private registry here. Okay? So Argo workflows will build the Docker image and then it will push the Docker image into this private registry. So the second task of Argo workflows is pushing the Docker image into a private registry. I'm using Nexus in this scenario as a private registry. And the third task of Argo workflows, its last task, is modifying the rollouts manifest to point to the new Docker image. But what does it mean? As you know, we can run an application into a Kubernetes cluster using standard deployment objects or stateful set. I'm using Argo rollouts instead of deployment because it has some additional features. You can use canary strategy, blue-green strategy, and also you can use analysis in Argo rollouts. So I prefer to use Argo rollouts to run my application into Kubernetes cluster. Okay? First of all, let's go to Argo rollouts directory here. We have a file here called nginx rollouts. And as you can see here, its kind is rollouts. I will dive deeper into this file, but for now, pay attention here, image field. As you can see here, the image that this rollouts is using to run my application is this. So if Argo workflows build a new Docker image for my application, I need to replace the new Docker image with the previous one. For example, let's imagine that the current Docker image is nginx v1. And after that, I make a change to the source code of my application. So Argo workflows will build the new Docker image based on the latest changes and will push the Docker image into my Nexus registry. So the last task of Argo workflows is replacing the new Docker image, replacing the previous Docker image with the new one. So it will modify this field in the rollouts. For example, it will replace v1 to, for example, v2. So the last task of Argo workflows is modifying and replacing image field in Argo rollouts manifest to point to the new Docker image. Okay? Very good. So Argo workflows will push this commit into my GitHub repository. Okay? And also, I'm using argo-cd. This is the application of argo-cd, Argo application. Its kind is application. If you are not familiar with these tools, you have to watch their videos first and come back to this project. Okay? As you can see here, argo-cd will scan this path, and if it detects any new changes here in this path, it will apply that or those changes into Kubernetes cluster. If I make a new commit, if I push a new commit in this path, argo-cd will detect my new activity and will apply those new changes into my Kubernetes cluster. So when argo-workflows replace the previous Docker image with the new one in argo-rollouts manifest, it will push that commit, it will push that change into this path. So argo-cd detects this change and it will apply the change into Kubernetes cluster. So we will switch to the new version of the application using argo-cd, because argo-cd applies that or those new changes into our Kubernetes cluster. So building the Docker image, pushing the Docker image, modifying the argo-rollouts manifest, and applying that change into Kubernetes cluster are the responsibilities of our Argo tools in this scenario. Very good. First of all, I'm going to dive deeper into each files of this scenario, and then we will run that scenario to see how it works, okay? We talked about Docker file and index.html in app directory, so I don't need to explain this directory, okay? The second directory that I want to talk about it is argo-workflows. It's very important. I want to mention it again that if you are not familiar with argo-workflows, you will need to watch the videos related to workflows first and then come back to this session. First of all, let's go to workflows yum file, okay? Its kind is workflow, and I'm using generate name instead of name because each workflow will have a unique name, will have a different name, okay? And also, I'm using some different global parameters for my workflow. Repo URL, branch, and Nexus registry. This is the repository that I'm going to use it in this scenario, argo-cd tutorial.git, this repository. And also, I need to provide two important things, username and token. As I said previously, argo-workflows needs to access to our repository to go to rollouts manifest and replace the previous image with a new one. So it needs to write to our GitHub repository because we need to provide username and token here. The branch is main, and the Nexus register, this is the IP address of my Nexus registry, and this is the port of the repository into this private registry. Because of that, first of all, I need to create a repository to use it here. I click on create repository. I'm looking for Docker hosted. Yes. Its name is Argo demo. I'm using HTTP and its port is 8085 and enable Docker v1 API, and I click on create repository. Okay, we created a repository with hosted type, Docker hosted, and its port is 8085. So this is the IP address of my Nexus registry, and this is the port of my repository. I'm using artifact repository ref here. We are using artifacts in this workflow. if you are using artifacts in your workflow, you need to configure an artifact repository to store your artifacts there. Because of that, I have set up Minayo as the artifact repository of this scenario. If I go to localhost in this port, this is a dashboard of my Minayo. So I'm going to use artifacts in my workflow, and I need to store those artifacts into Minayo. Because of that, I need to integrate Minayo with Argo-workflows using this config map. This is the config map related to integrating Minayo with Argo-workflows. And I have done this already. If I type kubectl get secret get config map -n argo-events. I'm using argo-events namespace. It doesn't matter what is the namespace, but for now, my configs, my secrets, my config maps are in this namespace. But you can use Argo namespace. It doesn't matter. When I type kubectl get config map -n argo-events, we have a config map named artifact repository that I have set up already. This is the config map that is related to integrating Minayo with Argo-workflows. In the previous session, we learned how to configure an artifact repository, and we learned how to integrate an artifact repository with your Argo-workflows. Okay. I'm using a template here called CI, and its type is DAG. DAG template is responsible to execute other templates. It's not going to do a special thing. It's going to execute and call other templates. In this scenario, it's going to execute 3 different templates, 3 different tasks. Clone repo task, build, push, and update manifest task. Okay? First of all, let's start with clone repo task. As you can see here, I'm using template ref. When I'm using template ref, I mean that I'm going to refer to a workflow template. The name of the workflow template that I'm going to refer is clone repo workflow template. So we have a separate file here in this directory, argo-workflows, named clone-repo.yaml. I'm going to refer to this workflow template. As you can see here, its kind is workflow template, and its name is clone repo workflow template. So this is the first task that DAG template is responsible to execute it. Okay? First of all, we need to clone the repository. If Argo-workflows needs to build the Docker image based on our Docker file, based on the source code of my application, if Argo-workflows needs to replace the previous image file with the new one in argo-rollouts manifest, so it needs to access the files and folders of my repository. Because of that, I need to clone the repository, and then I need to store my GitHub repository. I need to store the files and folders of my repo into a path. This is the path I'm using, /tmp/source. And I need to use an artifact to store our files and folders. I'm using outputs and artifacts, and its name is source, and its path is /tmp/source. /tmp/source contains the files and folders of my GitHub repository, and I'm going to store all of them into an artifact named source. So, source artifact contains the files and folders of my GitHub repository. Okay. Let's go back to workflows YAML. The second task is build push task. And as you can see here, I'm using template ref again because build and push task is a workflow template, and its name is build push workflow template. So we have a file here called buildpush.yaml. This file is very, very important. In this template, in this workflow template, we are going to build and then push the Docker image into a private registry. When I say push the Docker image into a private registry, it means that argo-workflows needs to access to our private registry. It's so important. So where are the credentials to access to our private registry? Okay. When I type docker login -u admin and password, it returns a message, login succeeded. It means that we logged in to our private registry successfully. And if I type docker tag nginx alpine 2.5/nginx alpine. So we have a new Docker image here called nginx alpine. So when I type docker push in this image, okay, this Docker image has been pushed to my Nexus registry. When I go to our repository here, browse argo demo, nginx tags, we have a new tag here, alpine. This is the Docker image that I pushed previously. So I pushed my Docker image without any credentials because when I typed login, Docker stored these credentials into a file called config.json. So when I type root.docker config.json, this is the file that Docker created to store the credentials related to access to our private registry. So when I type docker push, there is no need to provide any credentials again because Docker has stored those credentials into this JSON file. Because of that, if you're going to push your image with argo-workflows, argo-workflows needs to access to your config.json to know what is the credential to push your Docker image. Because of that, first of all, we need to create a Kubernetes secret named, for example, docker-config.secret. The name is not important, but As you can see here, I'm saying dash dash from file. This is the path of your config.json. For example, the path of my config.json is /root/docker .docker /config.json. So when you create this Kubernetes secret, you can use this secret in your workflow to access to your private register to push your Docker image. I have done this already. So when I type kubectl get secret-n argo-events, I have a secret named Docker config secret. So I created this secret and I need to use this secret in my workflow. Because of that, in this workflow, we are using volumes. The name of the volume is Docker config secret, and we are using this secret, Docker config secret. And we need to mount this secret into my container. Because of that, I'm using volume mounts, and the mount path is /.docker. So into this container, we will have a file in /.docker /config.json. So using this JSON file, argo-workflows can push the Docker image into your private register. This is so important. And also, if you want to add your private registry to your Docker container runtime, you need to create a file called docker etc docker daemon.json. I have done this already, but you need to do that. If you are going to add your private registry to your Docker container runtime, you have to use this syntax in secure registries, the private registry and the port of your repository. But if you are running containerd as your container runtime, you need to do that using a different way. As you know, I'm using kind to run my Kubernetes cluster in this course. Because of that, if I type docker ps, we have a container called kind control plane. This is a container related to my old Kubernetes cluster. So when I type docker exec -it kind control plane in bash, okay, and if I type etc containerd config.tom, you need to modify this config.tom to add your private registry to your containerd container runtime. Okay, I have done this already, but you can add these 4 lines to your config.tom registry.mirrors, and this is the IP address of my Nexus registry, the port of my repository, and the endpoint. So you need to add these 4 lines if you are running containerd. My Kubernetes cluster container runtime is containerd, so I have to add these 4 lines to my containerd container runtime. Add my insecure private registry. Okay. Let's go back to our file here. So I explained about volumes, Docker config secret. Another thing that is so important is build kit. We are using build kit to build our Docker image. If you see the documentations of Argo workflows, it says that if you want to build the Docker image using Argo workflows, it's better to use build kit. Because of that, when I type build kit, this is the GitHub repository of build kit. It's very good. If you see its README, it has a lot of information about build kit. I have used the syntax related to build kit from here to build my Docker image, and I'm using build-ctl daemonless.sh to build my Docker images. Okay. These args are so important. Build frontend. The frontend is Docker file -- local context equals dot -- local Docker file equals dot. It means that the source code of my application, the files and folders of my application, and also the Docker file are located in the current directory, because I'm using dot. Dot means current directory. Okay? So I need to change the directory where the files and folders of my applications and Docker files are located. As you know, we have a directory here called app, and we have Docker file and HTML file into this path, okay? So I need to change the directory to app directory to access my Docker file and to access my files and folders of my application, okay? Because of that, I'm using working dir to change the directory to /app directory. Pay attention to the first section, tmp source. As I said previously, we stored the files and folders of our GitHub repository into an artifact named source. So we are using that artifact into this path, tmp source. So when I say /tmp/source, it means that I have all these files and folders of my GitHub repository, okay? And then combining Argo tools. So this is the directory, I'm going to change it. I'm combining Argo tools. When I click on it, we have a new directory named app. So we are changing the directory to app directory. Because of that, I'm using dot here, where the Docker file and files and folders of my application are located. Very good. And then I need to push the Docker image. These are the args related to build the Docker image, and then I need to push my Docker image. Because of that, we have a section here, --output, type equals image, and this is the image name of my Docker image. Workflow.parameters.nexus registry. When I go to workflows.yaml, I have this Nexus registry. So this is the value related to Nexus registry. I copy the content here. So this is the workflow.parameters Nexus registry /nginx and workflow.uid. I have not defined this variable. This is a built-in variable of workflow. Each workflow has a unique UID. You can access to the UID of each workflow using this variable workflow.uid. So each workflow has a unique UID, for example, like this. Okay? So the syntax of our Docker image will be something like this. And then I say that push equals true. So it will push the Docker image into my GitHub repository. And we are using an insecure private registry. Because of that, I say registry.insecure equals true. Very good. And also, okay, that's enough. Let's go to workflows YAML. And the last section of this DAG template is update manifest test. But before that, let's pay attention to this section. When I'm using DAG template to execute build and push tasks, and when I'm going to refer to my workflow template, I'm using arguments artifacts. As you know, we generated an artifact in clone repo task. I need to use that generated artifact into another template. Because of that, I'm using this syntax to use the generated artifact of clone repo task into build and push task. The artifact is the files and folders of my GitHub repository. Okay? The last task is update manifest task. It has two dependencies, clone repo task and build and push task. It means that this task will be run after clone repo task and build and push task. And as you can see here, we are using arguments and artifacts here too. We generated an artifact in clone repo task, and we are using that artifact in build and push task as well as update manifest task to access to our GitHub repository. Its template ref is update manifest workflow template. So we have a file here called update manifest. Very good. I'm using script template, and also I'm using inputs artifact, and the name of the artifact is source to access to our GitHub repository. We generated an artifact repository in the first task, and we are using that generated artifact in this task. I'm using working dir to change the directory to argo-rollouts. In this section, argo-rollouts is responsible to modify the rollouts manifest and replace the previous image tag with a new one. So we need to change the directory to argo-rollouts directory like this. When we change the directory to combining argo tool / argo-rollouts, so now I'm using set command to replace the previous image tag with the new one, as you can see here in nginx rollouts.yaml file. I mean this file, nginx-rollouts.yaml. And after that, I'm using a username and email and git add, git commit, and git push. Okay? These are all the responsibilities of Argo workflows in this scenario. First of all, it will clone the repository to access to the files and folders of our repository. And then it will build the Docker image of my application and push it to our Nexus registry. And then it will responsible to modify the image field of nginx rollouts to point to the new version of my application. And it will push the change into our GitHub repository. So these are all the tasks related to Argo workflows in this scenario. Very good. Let's go to Argo rollouts manifests. The first manifest is nginx-rollouts. As you can see here, its kind is rollouts, and the number of replicas is 5. In this scenario, I'm using canary strategy with a set of steps, but you can use any other types of strategies. For example, you can use nginx as a traffic router, as a traffic manager to manage your awaits. And also you can use blue-green strategy if you want. And also you can add analysis as a feature to your rollouts. But in this scenario, I'm using canary with a set of weights. First of all, when argo-cd applies these rollouts, 20% of the weight, 20% of the weight will be routed to the new version of the application. And then we have a pause, but this pause has no duration. You know that if the pause has no duration, it means that we have to promote and we have to unpause the rollouts manually. And after that, 40% of the weight, 40% of the traffic will be routed to the new version. And after 10 seconds, it will be 60%. And after 20 seconds, it will be 80%. And after 1 minute, all the traffic will be routed to the new version of the application. And also, I'm using this image. I need to replace this IP address because the IP address of my Nexus registry has been changed. So I need to change it. And this is the service related to the rollouts. And also, I have an ingress here. I have an ingress here to point to nginx service. Its backend service is nginx service. So we can access to our rollouts using this host, argo.demo. Very good. This is about Argo rollouts. And about argo-cd, this is the application of argo-cd. It will apply this application in argo-demo namespace in the current Kubernetes cluster. Kubernetes, the default as we see. The project is default. And it will scan this path, combining Argo tools, Argo rollouts. If it detects any changes into this path, it will apply those changes into Kubernetes cluster. The repo URL is the repository of our course. The target revision is main. And sync policy, we are using automated syncing, pruning, and self-healing. So we don't need to sync our application manually. Argo-cd will sync the application automatically. And also, we can add a sync option called create namespace equals true, like this. If argo-demo is not available in my Kubernetes cluster, with this sync option, Argo-cd will create it before applying. Okay? Very good. It was about Argo-cd. Okay. These are all the files that we need to implement this scenario. But before executing this scenario, we need to change some different things. For example, I need to modify this IP address, and also in the workflows, we need to place the username and token here. I pause the video to do all these things, and after that, we will execute this scenario. Okay, I modified the token. I replaced the real token in my workflow, and I modified and I changed the IP address of Nexus registry, and everything is ready to execute this scenario. Okay. First of all, let's start with Nexus registry. We have a repository here called argo-demo, and we have a Docker image here called nginx. And the only tag that is available in this repository is Alpine, nginx Alpine. Okay? And also we have Minayo here. I need to log into Minayo. I already grabbed its password, but for now, you can type kubectl get secret -n argo-events argo-artifacts -o yum. I need to decode this password to log into Minayo. Very good. So I log into Minayo, and this is the dashboard of Minayo. As you can see here, we have a bucket called my-bucket. I have already set up this bucket. I have already created this bucket. You need to create a bucket here to store your artifacts into that. So we have a bucket. It has 43 objects. These objects related to the previous tests that I had. It doesn't matter, but we need a bucket to store our workflow artifacts into that. So my-bucket is an ideal choice. Very good. So the another thing is argo-cd dashboard. So I can access to my argo-cd dashboard UI using this port. The username is admin, but what is the password? I type kubectl get secret -n argo-cd argo-cd initial admin secret -o yum, and I need to decode this password to log into argo-cd base 64 -- decode. Very good. We have no applications yet. And also we need to log into argo-workflows dashboard UI. DevOps.hobbies. Very good. There's no workflows yet. And also we need to log into argo-rollouts dashboard. If you want to access to argo-rollouts dashboard, you have to do that. kubectl argo-rollouts dashboard. And this dashboard is available in this path. Very good. And also, if you remember, we wrote an ingress to access to our application. If I go to combining Argo tools, argo-rollouts directory, we have a file here called nginx-ingress. Okay? We can access to our application using argo.demo. So if I type http argo.demo, this is the web page related to our application, but we receive not found because there is no applications applied in our Kubernetes cluster. So there's nothing here yet. But we can access to our application web page using argo.demo with this ingress. So everything is available. And as I said earlier, the only tag that is available in my Argo demo repository is Alpine. And if I go to Argo rollouts manifest, we are using this image here, Nginx Alpine. This image is available in my Nexus registry, so there's no problem. Okay. Let's go to our GitHub repository, files and folders, combining Argo tools, very good. Let's go to Argo workflows directory. We have 4 different files here. A workflow and 3 workflow templates. If you want to submit a workflow, you need to create its workflow templates first. Okay? If I type argo templates list -n argo template, there are 3 different templates that are available in Argo namespace. But in this scenario, I'm going to use argo-events namespace. So if I type it, as you can see here, there is no templates in this namespace. Because of that, first of all, I need to create the template of these 3 different files. So I type argo template create clone repo.yaml-n argo events. The second file is build and push, and the third one is update manifest. So if I type list again, you now see 3 different templates in Argo events namespace. The namespace is not important, but because my all secrets and config maps are available in Argo events namespace, I'm using Argo events in this scenario. But you can use any other types of namespaces based on your needs, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so we have 3 different templates here. But before submitting the workflow, I need to apply my argo-cd application. So I go to argo-cd application. We have an application here called argo-app. And if I open it, it will apply our application in Argo demo namespace. Okay, so I type kubectl apply-f argo-app.yaml in argo-cd namespace. This application has been created. And now we have a new application, Argo demo application. And it has been synced because autosync is enabled in my argo-cd application. The number of replicas is 5. As you can see here, the number of replicas is 5. And we are using Nginx Alpine image. So if I refresh this page, we will see the default web page of Nginx here. Very good. So let's go to argo-rollouts dashboard. We have a new rollouts called Nginx-rollouts. We are in revision 1 and we are using this image and the number of replicas is 5. Very good. For example, I'm going to make a change to my application. For example, I go to index.html and make a change to my application to build the Docker image. So, for example, version 1.0.0, I remove the last 0. For example, 1.0 is good. I commit the change. So, this is the message that I want to see. Welcome to my website, version 1.0. I need to build an image. I need to push the image into my Nexus registry, and then I need to modify the rollouts manifest to point to the new version of the application. All of these responsibilities will be done by argo-workflows. So let's go to argo-workflows, and I type argo submit workflows.yam in argo-events namespace. Very good. Let's go to argo-workflows dashboard UI. This is the workflow that is running. Its first task is clone repo task. It will generate an artifact. This artifact is the files and folders of our GitHub repository. Yeah. And it will store this artifact into Minayo. So this artifact will be stored in Minayo. Very good. The second task is build and push task. It first wants to build the Docker image, as you can see, and then it will push the new Docker image into my Nexus register. So after that, if I refresh this page, we will see a new tag here alongside Alpine. Okay, I'm going to wait for the final result of building my application, and after that, I will unpause the video. For now, I pause the video. Okay, this task has been done, and in the last section, argo-workflows pushed the Docker image into my Nexus registry. So when I go to my Nexus registry, and if I refresh this page, and if I click on Nginx and tags, yes, this is the new Docker image that argo-workflows pushed to my Nexus registry. Very good. And also, the next task is update that dash manifest that its phase is succeeded. Let's go to logs. And you can see that image.tag has been changed to something like this. So if I go to my GitHub repository, yes, this is the commit message. Image.tag has been changed to something like this. This is the workflow UID, as I said previously. So if I go to argo-rollouts, and if I click on Nginx rollouts, you can see that the image field has been changed from Nginx Alpine to Nginx something like this, the workflow UID. Very good. And also, argo-cd will detect this change because argo-cd is scanning this path, argo-rollouts path. So we have a new activity, we have a new change in argo-rollouts directory. So argo-cd will detect this change and applies that or those changes into Kubernetes cluster. So if I click on refresh, as you can see here, we have a new replica set, Nginx rollouts. This is the new replica set. So now we have two different replica sets. We have two different replica sets. If I go to argo.demo and if I refresh this page, you can see that if I refresh multiple times of argo.demo, I can see welcome to my website version 1.0. So it's very good. When we go to Argo-rollouts dashboard, you can see that 20% of traffic is routed to the new version of the application. Because of that, when I refresh multiple times, you can see 20% of the traffic is routed to the new version of the application. Okay? In the next step, we have pause, and it has no durations. It means that we have to unpause the rollouts manually, and after that, 40% of traffic will be routed to the new version. And after 10 seconds, 60%, after 20 seconds, 80%, and after 1 minute, all the traffic will be routed to the new version of the application. So now we need to unpause the rollouts manually. This is the name of the rollout. So let's go here. I type kubectl argo-rollouts promote nginx rollouts -n argo demo. Rollout nginx rollouts promoted. So 40% of traffic is routed to the new version, and after 10 seconds, 60%. We have 3 replicas in revision 2. So if I refresh this page multiple times, you can see that 60% of traffic is routed to version 1. And also, version 1.0, the new version of the application. And after 20 seconds, 80%. So most of the traffic is routed to the new version of the application. Yes. And after 1 minute, all the traffic is routed to the new version. So we have 1 replica in revision 1, and we have 4 replicas in revision 2. After 1 minute, we won't see this default web page, because all the traffic will be routed to the new version of the application. Let's wait for 1 minute, and we will see how it works. Okay. The number of replicas in revision 2 is 5, and all replicas has been scaled down to 0. So all the traffic is routed to new version of the application. We won't see the default web page of Nginx. If I refresh multiple times, you can see that all the traffic has been routed to the new version of the application. Very, very good. So we combined all these tools together. We created a CICD pipeline. We built a Docker image. We pushed our Docker image into Nexus registry, and also we modified the rollouts manifest, and we applied the new changes into Kubernetes cluster using argo-rollouts, and also we used canary strategy for our application. Very good. In the next session, I'm going to add argo-events to this project. As you can see here, if I make a change to my application, for example, I make a change into the source code of my application. For example, I make a change in index.html. After that, I need to manually submit my workflow. For example, I type argo-submit -n argo-events workflow.yaml. It's not desirable. I have a situation which this workflow will run automatically. So argo-events is responsible to trigger our workflow, and there is no need to submit our workflow manually. So in the next session, I will add argo-events to this project to automate this project more. Very good. It was about combining Argo tools. And I will see you soon.